Think about the American West's most precious resource. Is it gold, oil, timber, or food? No. The most important resource that helped build the West was water. Hello, I'm Robert Conrad. I spent a good deal of my time in the West, and I'm still inspired by what the men and women of our nation, specifically the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, have accomplished. Water, its effective use, its storage and distribution has allowed families to settle, farm, and create one of the richest and most diverse economies on earth. The West we know today is a story about water. The Bureau of Reclamation, whose philosophy of stewardship fulfilled the promise that the lands and waters of the American West exist for the benefit of all. It began with Lewis and Clark expedition of 1803. Their discoveries encouraged the settlement and expansion of a vast and emerging nation. After the Civil War, Major John Wesley Powell began a 5-year survey of the American Southwest. His courageous group of adventurers became the first to explore the treacherous Colorado River. Powell carefully studied this arid western landscape and saw early settlers diverting water from streams and rivers. He realized that demand would soon outstrip supply. Powell concluded that the settlement of the region would only succeed if the federal government stepped in and harnessed the western waters for coordinated delivery to farmers. He hoped federal involvement would prevent family farmers from being victims of corrupt private irrigation schemes. Powell's theories were condemned by many: land speculators, cattle barons, and railroad tycoons who profit from the unchallenged control of the land and water. But in the new century, a young and vigorous president was to bring about change.
I'm Theodore Roosevelt, although I prefer to be called T.R. This is my American West. I first came here in the 1880s to prove to myself that I had what it takes to be a man: courage, fortitude, strength. I saw towering mountains so high you had to arch your neck in order to see the tops, thunderous rivers, and plains so vast the grasses appeared as glorious seas. The Native Americans knew the power of this land. I wonder what we men so new to this place will find its potential to be.
Roosevelt admired the courage of the farmers. Their determination to farm and ranch in the West truly inspired him.
This magnificent land around me is timeless. Man is merely passing through. But it has the potential to bring wealth to millions. Can we not exploit its riches and at the same time preserve its treasures? It won't be easy, but it must be done.
Roosevelt supported the now growing reclamation movement based on Powell's concept of irrigating arid lands. He sought to create a stable, farm-based economy. He also saw the reclamation movement as a way to combine his desire to promote conservation of open space and wildlife in the West with the movement to sustain Western farming.
All the remaining water.
But Roosevelt would have to fight for his vision and challenge Congress for reclamation of arid public lands.
I believe in the practical value of a good horse. This word technology is very unsettling. I would like to think that the needed technology is in fact human ingenuity and not some machine whose workings would frighten such a noble creature. Nonetheless, we do have work to do. We shall prevail, and the land will be respected, although it may take an act of Congress to see it through.
And it did. Under intense White House pressure, Congress passed the Reclamation Act, which Roosevelt signed into law on June 17, 1902. Now, the mechanics of the Reclamation Act had to be hammered out in an embattled Congress. Disputes surrounded even the basic principles of how water and land were to be made available to settlers. Eventually, deals were struck, compromises were reached. Finally, in 14 western states and the territories of Arizona and New Mexico, construction of irrigation projects commenced. Texas was later added in 1906. At first, just a 600-man civil engineering group of the newly created U.S. Reclamation Service began building dams and canals, and their work would profoundly impact our nation. The first project was to build the Derby Diversion Dam in northern Nevada. This was the start of federal irrigation in the West, later called the Newlands Project. The Reclamation Act and the Newlands Project accomplished what Roosevelt and the Bureau wanted to do: settle the West.
It has been said of me that I brought the nation into the 20th century. Well, so be it. But it was the ingenuity and the resources of our nation which brought it to the forefront of the world.
From the Midwest to the Far West, water projects started to take shape, delivering water to a dry and thirsty land. As this young agency entered the roaring 20s, the service changed its name to the Bureau of Reclamation. In 1922, Commerce Secretary Herbert Hoover brought together representatives of 7 western states to share the waters of the Colorado River. Not surprisingly, lively debate ensued before an interstate compact was signed. Ironically, the problem of too much water was initially behind the decision to build dams to protect settlers' lands and crops. Hoover patiently crafted an agreement paving the way for construction of what would become one of the most technically challenging and innovative structures in America, the Hoover Dam. Yet when construction began, America was in the grips of the Great Depression. Farmers and ranchers looked to the Bureau of Reclamation to save them from the cycle of devastation brought on by drought and floods. To build the Hoover Dam, Bureau employees and job seekers flocked to the site outside the sleepy settlement of Las Vegas, Nevada. The building of Hoover would require new thinking about structural loads. Bureau engineers would have to develop new ways of calculating and building an immense dam that would support enormous stress.
To ensure the greatest possible stability for the foundation of the dam, meticulous care was exercised in preparing the rock surfaces for the reception of the first concrete.
American know-how prevailed, and in 1935, TR's cousin, President Franklin Roosevelt, dedicated the huge dam, completed in record time.
In the name of the people of the United States, to whom you, bold and armed, are a symbol of greater things in the future, I call you to life.
At the touch of the President's hand, an electrical impulse starts the governor of the first turbine to produce power at Boulder Dam.
At the same time, on the Columbia River in Washington State, Bureau engineers built the immense Grand Coulee Dam.
But now the greatest wonder is in Uncle Sam's fair land. It's that keen Columbia River and the big Grand Coulee Dam.
Both structures have been compared to the building of the pyramids of Egypt. Other projects like the giant Central Valley Project in California would grow to 20 dams and more than 500 miles of canals. This enabled farmers to eventually produce about half the fruits and vegetables grown in the United States. In the meantime, controversy about the reclamation projects continued on another topic. Could the government officially manage the development of hydroelectric power at these dams? And would there ever be a market for all the power federal projects would provide? Would that unfairly compete with private power producers? In the end, production of clean hydroelectric power became a feature of many reclamation projects, and just in time. Suddenly, our nation was plunged into war. Electric energy generated by the Great Western Dams provided power for construction of aircraft, ships, and other vital war materials. From Seattle to Los Angeles, electric power fed the machines of industry as water nourished crops, which in turn fed our nation and troops overseas. Today, 58 power plants generate power for millions of people, making the Bureau of Reclamation the 9th largest utility in the United States. At the same time, water stored behind dams attracted thousands to reservoirs across the West. Growth demanded that some water be directed to urban areas as rural lands became suburban communities. The Bureau built projects as fast as Congress authorized them to satisfy active Westerners. Some projects were so enormous it took both the Bureau and Army Corps of Engineers to complete them. Work in the Southwest, such as the Central Arizona Project, brought water to Phoenix and Tucson to spur their growth. By the 1960s, concern for the environment gained national attention, and soon preserving environmental resources became just as important as building water projects. As the Bureau of Reclamation changed with the times, placing greater emphasis on water conservation, fisheries, and environmental restoration, and ensuring that dams, canals, and other facilities operate safely and in good working order. Now, as the Reclamation Act celebrates its 100th birthday, the Bureau can look back on its accomplishments. Enough water to supply 245 million families each year through the irrigation of millions of acres of land. Billions of dollars in flood damage is prevented. Reservoirs that provide opportunities for recreation at more than 300 recreation areas. Hydroelectric power for the high-tech industry, manufacturing, and private homes. In fact, 65% of all the vegetables and 25% of all the fruits and nuts are grown on federally irrigated land. But the most important achievement of the men and women of the Bureau of Reclamation may be their commitment to the vision.
A nation's power consists of two things: its material resources and the will of its people. Therefore, America is a power without equal. When you combine the efforts of these reclamation projects, canals, dams, reservoirs,